And the consortium is expanding. We have had a lot of interest from our partners that we work with who want to join into this conversation and work with us and collaborate to move this agenda forward. The vision of CRHA is to realize effective humanitarian and development action that emanates and is actually led by local actors and communities. We are fortunate to have 5 panelists to speak to us today. Not in any particular order. We have Millicent Atenya, who has over 10 years working in program operations and management. She's worked in renowned organizations, TICO, JPIGO, ICAP, and with reputable funders. She is an advocate for community development approaches and is here to advance localization. Angelo Katumba is, I've seen him introduce himself, over 20 years experience of simplifying complex science and health issues for communities. He is an associate of the Global Health Decolonization Movement, Africa. He is an expert in bridging biomedical research and public outreach through storytelling and advocacy. Angelo is a Ugandan based in New York City. We are happy to have him. Kennedy is Kennedy Ouma, leads TICO's program in Sub-Saharan Africa, delivering community-based healthcare solutions. He's previously managed partnerships and coordinated initiatives in 5 Kenyan countries. He's an expert in localization, community-led programming, and operational excellence. He has extensive experience with donor-funded projects and stakeholder engagement. Then we have Samuel Munyuiny, the founder and executive director of the African Institute for Children's Studies, leadership and governance expert, child rights specialist, and public health expert, focused on advancing children development and advocating for children's rights. He has led impactful initiatives to strengthen the community development and governance, and he is currently pursuing a PhD in leadership and governance. Lynn Ngugi has over 20 years of experience working in various UN agencies in various capacities across the world. She's currently policy advisor for Honorable Martha Karua's leadership. She's a founding member of national and international initiatives, including AICS. She focuses on human rights, policy development, and strategic governance. Welcome to all our panelists. Thank you very much for making time for this conversation. And today, the purpose of the conversation is to define or begin to define what strategic actions local organizations can take to accelerate localization. Localization is not a new conversation, it's not a new topic, but this topic has been really skewed. It's been, what do international organizations have to do? What do donors have to do? There has been very little spoken about what the local organizations have to do to make this agenda move forward. And so many people here, I believe, are local, based in the Global South. We want to bring our minds together to see how we can advance this agenda and make sure that localization moves from rhetoric and becomes everyday practice. So welcome to everyone. I will moderate this session. My name is Michael Kiragu. I work as an associate at AICS and at the Consortium for Imagining Humanitarian Action. Everyone, please we'll have a moment of question and answer, but as we go along, if you have a question, you have a comment, please put it in the chat. We'll come back to it, we'll address it, but we'll also have an open session which we can discuss freely with the panelists and get to hear your thoughts even from where you sit. So I will begin with the panelists who are here. I will put my camera off so that we spotlight these panelists, wonderful panelists. And I will just throw a few questions to get them started and have them warm up in this conversation, beginning with, in no particular order again, Millicent. Just to start us off, what would you say is your definition of localization in the development and humanitarian context? And also just feel free to say hi to everyone. Millicent?
So much, Michael, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Localization is basically the shift where we are shifting the designing, implementation, and decision-making power of humanitarian and development initiatives to their local actors. These local actors can be community-based organizations, local leadership, and even grassroots leaders. And the main reason and the focus of having this is to strategize and let communities to be in charge of the initiatives that are happening there, know the challenges, have solutions that can be transformed into initiatives that are impactful. This way, they're accountable, they're able to come up with initiatives that are sustainable, and we're able to see that as we build capacity and as we work with different local organizations. So basically, localization is moving power, decision-making, resources, implementation, and supporting our local organization towards program implementation in a successful way while driving operational excellency. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Millicent. Wonderfully stated. Kennedy, I would love to pose the same question. Welcome, and if you could just give us your thoughts on what localization is.
Thank you very much, Michael, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. I'll reintroduce myself again. My name is Kennedy Ouma. I currently coordinate operations for TICO Africa. So we, maybe just to take you through for those who've not had an opportunity to interact with the organization. So we are a non-profit. We leverage technology to transform any behavioral change that we do in the communities. And I want to believe that how we've structured our program is we work currently with 66 community-based organizations. And just to add on what Millicent has mentioned, I think it's important to emphasize that localization isn't just merely reallocating funds, that whereby we are now reallocating funds maybe from particular organizations to these particular local organizations. I think it's also important that we also talk about how we are going to build sustainable, locally owned solutions that make we are able to talk through about the sustainable development goals achievable at a grassroots level. So I think that involves us in ensuring that even at the local organizations that we lead or are led by various individuals, that there's also at that time we're able to build a capacity. We also talk about transfer of knowledge to these particular organizations that we work with. So we're able to basically shift the power to these particular local organizations, and we involve them in all the stages of programming that we have, from planning to implementations, so that it's also relevant to the communities that they're intended to serve. So currently, as a part of what we do at TICO, is that we, as part of our mission, is we support community-led initiatives to ensure that there is equity. Also, in those community-led organizations, we have to ensure that minority groups are represented. That is, youth, the women are represented, and all the local stakeholders are part of these initiatives that we do with these community-based organizations. I've spoken about capacity building as also being part of something that moving forward we have to ensure that this is done, because I think if we speak about just funding, there's been an increase of funding to various local organizations, but to ensure that there is capacity to deliver in terms of the leadership of those particular community-based organizations. I think I'll leave it at that, Michael, at this moment. We'll be able to discuss further as we proceed. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kennedy, for that wonderful elaboration of localization and opening up some of the aspects that we are going to be diving into as we discuss localization. Angelo, I would like you to come in and just it from where you sit. Do you think what do you think is the current status of localization? Are we making progress? Are we stalled? What's your take?
Great. Thank you so much, Michael, for inviting me, and thanks for having me. As introduced, I work with AVAC. We're a global nonprofit based in New York, but working in dozens of countries, mostly on the African continent. And localization is something that we take seriously and have been engaging in, mostly because we know that communities know what they need. And if we do not work to recenter power, the solutions, and I work in the HIV space mostly, community solutions won't be meaningful. So in terms of the status of localization, we are moving, but I would say not at the pace that we should be, because often, and again, I totally agree with my colleagues who have said funding isn't the only thing that we should be focusing on localization. That is very true. But funding does drive a lot of the things that need to happen to recenter power, to build the capacity, as my colleagues have said. But at the moment, a lot of power is centered in the global north. A lot of power is still centered in the capitals, in Nairobi, in Kampala, in Juba. We, I think, have a long way to go in recentering that power, in prioritizing the communities, the local communities where our, the services are needed. So I think the conversation has started, and that's a really good place to start. But more needs to be done to, for example, in speaking about capacity, often we assume that the local communities don't have capacity, and we need to build that capacity. And in some cases, this is true. But in many cases, capacity does exist. And instead of mining and identifying the areas where communities are strong and can lead on their own, we are very quick to jump in and say, we want to build their capacity. Again, we are using our own mental models to determine what that capacity is, instead of looking to the communities that we're serving to say what's already available and how can we leverage what's available, and then work with communities to identify what's missing. So Michael, if you ask me from where I sit right now, I think our minds are in the right place, but we can do more to ensure that we recenter and we meaningfully engage communities in negotiating to lead them to where and to work with them, support them to the solutions that they need, be it HIV prevention, be it something else. So I would say I am optimistic, but we are not yet where I think we should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelo, and for those wonderful comments. And I invite Samuel with, you are seated in the Global South. You're leading this Pan-African NGO. Do you feel like we are making progress with localization? Is it a reality? Is it being felt? Communities being engaged? What is your take?
Well, thank you, Dr. Kiragu, and the team from ACS and the CRHA, that is the Consortium for Imagining Humanitarian Action, and my colleagues have joined. Well, I think being one of the founder members of the African Institute for Children's Studies, and I'm glad Lynn Ngugi is with me here and other people we've worked with in this journey of about 16 years now. When we say whether we are making progress or not, I think it is really maybe not the appropriate question, really, if you ask me, because being a local organization, I live out localization. I mean, it is not a new thing to be told, let's have a conversation on localization. And my colleagues have already said it. It is nothing to do with shifting resources. It is much more about having organizations that are created by people in the communities and who can play leadership role in decision making, in resource allocation, and not just resources from out there. And why I say that shouldn't be a foreign thing for any local organization. When we started AICS, or AICS as others call it, 16 years ago thereabout, we wanted to create a platform where Africans across the continent can be able to converge and set pace on what is a priority agenda, specifically to children, but generally in community development. And therefore, it is exactly what everyone is trying to call out as localization. We've already been doing it. I think what is changing here, and it is changing for the good, but I'll give a brief historical background to it also that we need to be very aware of, that this is really about the power shift, about trusting local organizations, about letting them truly set the pace. Are we making progress on that? I think it's really, it's difficult to say that that is really working. And I'll give some examples. So first of all, where did this begin? Where did we get to a point where we've always had local organization? We've always had institutions trying to respond to crises, whether humanitarian or development. But how comes it seems like it's a new conversation since
I think we lost Samuel's.
Sam, we can't hear you anymore. We lost your audio. We can't hear you. Okay. If I can read his sign language, he's saying we move on a little, then we'll come back to him. Let's move on to Lynn. We don't want to lose, some don't lose that train of thought. I think you are touching on something really important. Lynn, welcome. So good to see you. Thank you for making time for this conversation. What do you think? Where are we at with localization? Do you think we are moving forward? I know you've been in this humanitarian and development space for a while. Are you seeing us making progress, or are we spinning our wheels here? You are muted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, evening, everyone. Really great to be here, and thank you so much, Dr. for this. I think the fact that we're having this conversation is already a very good sign that we're going somewhere. I was somehow hoping that Sam would complete what he was saying, and then I would just take the cue from there, because I thought that it was going to be a very good segue to what I wanted to say. So I struggled a little bit. I was actually ahead of this meeting because I had logged in earlier. And then when the time came, I don't know what happened to my connectivity, so I started fumbling. But what I was trying to do, I was trying to send a sign that would be used, and that I wanted to use as a basis for the beginning of this conversation for me, and from where I wanted to begin. I hope that someone can help me Google and get the sign. There's a symbol, it's called the Sankofa. Can somebody just find it and put it there? The Sankofa, of course, is an Akan word, is an African symbol, and is a symbol of a bird with his head moving forward, but with his head looking down. And I wanted to go to that philosophy for a little bit, and why it is. It's a literal translation, comes from the Akan proverb that basically means that it is not taboo to look back for what you forgot or what you left behind. And that is where I would like to start. And that is why I thought that Sam's intro was very important. The Sankofa is a phrase that encourages learning from the past to inform the future, and reaching back to move forward, and lifting as we climb. So I think that is what I want, the crux of localization, and what I think about it. I think that we've been moving forward. In fact, humanitarian action, I think it's premised, or it's architectured around moving communities forward and moving from one place to an improvement place. But I don't know that at some point, I think this journey may have just started, took off completely, very, very quickly, without summoning the wisdom of the Sankofa to look forward, to look backward, so that we could propel forward. And I wanted to go back and agree with Sam that local people actually have always been the custodians of wit, wisdom, knowledge, skills, but also the experience of living and feeling and, exercising everything that is around them. I think that when we go to places, oh, excellent, we have the sign there. And I'm even very happy that the bird is speaking something. That is the wisdom. I think the question is how we are holding what we are trying to pick from behind there. And I think that is where I feel that we should spend quite a bit of time. As Dr. says, that I've been around, Dr. Kirago says, I've been around quite a bit. So, and they know that I don't like to sugarcoat things. So I just like to say things as they are. I think I have absolutely no question on the intention. I think perhaps I have something to do with the speed with which we took off. And I think we took off and forgot a few things. And I think that we must now summon and borrow from the wisdom of the bird, and so that we can look backwards and see what we left and pick it, so that it can propel us forward. So it's sort of stepping back to gather momentum. And I think that is a wisdom that I would like to encourage ourselves to look at. And the reason why we must look back is because we are at the cusp of very, very many years, including mine in the humanitarian field. But we still, you know, there are quite a number of questions still abound. For instance, you know, there have been trillions and millions of dollars and effort, resources, human, every way of resourcing humanitarian action. But actually, the impact or the lives, because if we can really just go back to the basics, the lives of the people that are served has not necessarily significantly changed. And I think that those are some of the questions that have even resulted in the necessity of these kinds of conversations. I think because this is an intro, I wanted to stop there. Because as I agree with everyone that we have made inroads, including the wisdom of talking about and looking at localization and trying to ask ourselves, is it working? What is not working? What is it that we can do better? How can we leverage the time that we are in without forgetting the times that we are coming from and coming here? But I think also one thing to say that the spaces are also very important to look at. Look, we are here, even though we're virtual, where, you know, I can chat anyone and I will be able to strike a conversation with Angelo very, very easily, you know, or Kennedy, whoever, because we'll strike a conversation, we know what happens, and that is because we have been socialized in sort of this environment. I wish that we had a way of sitting at the local spaces and being able to interact the same. So you see, even with you know, for no fault of our own, we already seclude ourselves from the local. You know, we are here. If we were speaking from where South Sudan is where I started my work, if we were sitting in a village there, trying to look at the harvest in the last few years and trying to rank the years with the people, and some of them telling us we predicted actually. And then we will be saying, oh, but this is when we brought a lot of the seeds. And they said, they would tell us, it's because you did not ask us. Or where we think that we want to start, you know, a farming project, you know, to improve food security. And we think that people did not see what we can see. And then we plant and we go back and it's doing very well. And just before the harvest, we go back and there is absolutely nothing, no tomato, no pumpkin, nothing. And then we will say, but what happened? We're coming to celebrate the harvest. And they say, the hippos. The hippos came from the river and they ate everything. Because exactly this month is the time that the elephants come and they clear everything and all this. So that is wisdom. It is very practical. It is important to see how it gels and how it merges. And so that we don't completely forget the local. So I want to agree with everyone that there's been a lot of efforts. Perhaps we need to think Sankofa as we move forward, look back and see what we have forgotten. So I will interact a little bit because I think there's a set of questions, and I did attempt to give thought to all of them. Thank you so much. I hope that Dr. Kirago, I haven't taken all your time and I haven't lost everyone.
Thank you. We'll come back. I think there were some nuggets of wisdom there we want to mine. What is this Sankofa seeing, and what can we bring forward? Samuel, I hope the audio is fixed. I hope you can complete the thoughts?
Yeah, confirm you can hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh yeah, sorry, I had spared the best of my technology for earphones and they failed me. I've gone back to the original. Maybe that's symbolic of what we are saying today. So, well, I will be very brief in the interest of time. So I think, so have we made progress? I think in the fact that now it is locals who are having this conversation. For a long time, we've had, that challenge of the lion telling the story of the antelope. And now I really was hoping that we get to this point where it is local organizations leading this conversation on localization. But in what parameters? Is it anything new? I mean, and that's what I was explaining earlier on. We've always had institutions, we've always had African communities, organizations, African leaders trying to do something, whether in humanitarian or development context. But I think what is the difference here is the acknowledgement that we have to depart from, when you think about the world system theory and a lot of these developmental theories that assumed that for development to work, it has to look very Western, for example, to appreciating that you can actually have development that builds on indigenous knowledge, like Lynn has said here. And that is a new thing. That is where the shift of power really needs to come in. And maybe as we proceed on, I'll be able to give certain examples. So yes, we've made progress in acknowledging, but in the real practical things, I think, one, we're already doing a lot of good things as local organizations, but the conversation has to truly appreciate that it's giving power to the local teams to lead. Maybe we'll come back to it. I'll build that thought later on with examples.
Thank you, Sam. And I can really tell you are holding back some punches. We'll come back to that and hear what you have to say. So there's agreement. We are moving forward. And Millicent, what do you think is holding back this space? The conversation started in 2016 or even before, I think, but was put down most recently in 2016. What do you think is holding back this shift of power? The shift in capacity sharing. Why aren't we where we had promised to be in? I mean, 2025, I think, was meant to be a watershed period. We don't think that's going to happen by 2025. What is holding back?
Thank you, Dr. Kiragu. And just as my colleagues have mentioned, we separated ourselves from localization. It's there, we are aware about it, but what are we doing about it? So basically, there's a lot of awareness, advocacy. Word has to go there for people to understand what is localization. Even up to now, there's so much that has not been learned. There's so much that we don't know about localization. So first and foremost, it's about how do we create awareness? And we start in our communities. Which advocacy plans can we invest in? Because talking, it doesn't end there. Can we be part of that movement in our communities? Can we identify forums where we can pitch and elevate our voices towards localization? Yeah. Can we leverage on the partnerships that we're having, the government, organizations like Save the Children, find out, volunteer, and put that into community perspective. That will be very, very important. And also we are expertise in different areas. There's my colleague Kennedy in operations, there's Ngugi and all that. How do we come together as experts, and form a community of practice where we are sharing knowledge to our communities who are not enlightened so that they understand what is localization? What are some of the strategies that are just within the locations that we live in and we don't tap into them? You get? How can I support in implementation and project management? What are some of the best practices? So it's about sharing knowledge, having a community of practice where we are able to showcase some of the initiatives that we can start in the community level, like leadership. How do we improve leadership? We've worked with quite a number of community-based organizations. Does it enter to implementation? Do we get time to go later and find out how they're implementing? What has been some of the challenges that they're encountering? Then use that as a starting point. Empower, capacity build, ensure that they know how to do advocacy. They're doing it the right way, it's targeted, they have the right material and information. Ensure that they have a good team. There's leadership. They know how they can articulate whatever they want out there to partners. If they're not able to do that, how do you mentor? How do we tap into peer-to-peer learning? So for me, the most important thing is capacity building, then identify partnerships. Help them identify partnerships. This initiative will improve the organization at large and entirely the entire country. So let us not leave it at the local level, but let's be the voice that is driving and bringing partnerships that will help some of these organizations share lessons learned, share resources, best practices and knowledge. So for me is, let's start as an individual. If you're able to offer expertise, provide that expertise. If you have forums that people can benefit from, let's share that, let them get knowledge, let them be enlightened. And when you do that and work together as experts in this field, we'll be able to demonstrate a lot of change. We'll see a lot of shift, and we'll also see communities that understand the problem at hand, and they're actively engaging and providing strategies and feeling heard and empowered. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Millicent. Really appreciate that. I'll ask Kennedy to take on the same question. What's been holding back this pace that we had envisioned?
Okay, yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Kirago. So maybe before ahead, Lynn had made a comment that we look like we've also separated ourselves from the locals. I'm not sure if, or I'm quoting you incorrectly, Lynn, you'll correct me if you aren't the one. So number one is that all these particular programs, all these projects that you're doing have to be done in these communities. So I don't think it's possible for us to be able to separate ourselves from these communities that we are serving. So I think currently what I'm seeing, and will be a bit of one, there is definitely the funding challenge where we all agree there's a funding challenge whereby still funders are preferring to work with international or big organizations, and then who again now subcontract local organizations to be able to do the same work. So I think that is still a challenge that we are experiencing. But on the flip side, a lot of funders in the recent past, and I liked someone mentioned that let's not even look at funding that is coming from outside. So we have even local funders. So our own governments are able to fund some of these particular initiatives that we try to fund for. For example, I know now there's a lot of interest in doing co-funding initiatives with the county governments in any particular level, be it education, be it health, and so forth. And any of the participants can correct me if I'm wrong. I've not seen maybe so much of locally run organizations coming up with such particular initiatives. I'm not sure if Food for Kenya falls under this, but we're not seeing a lot of this happening. I know, and you could see that international or very big organizations have sensed this, and they are actually moving and doing co-creation activities with counties and trying to ensure that these initiatives are also have some local element to it. So again, we have funders who are now saying we only fund and in the agreement that you're working with the local organizations, and you're also empowering those local communities. So again, it's also a challenge to us as participants in this particular space to ensure that these organizations, and like continue saying, they are capacity built, because an organization that has not had its infrastructure placed well, and I know some have this strong opinion that we have really local organizations that can be able to take on these particular initiatives. So it's important that the capacity building has to happen. I know we've come a long way and we've improved quite a bit. A lot of local actors that we are seeing are locally led. Even in the international space, we're seeing locally led staff, locally led individuals running these particular organizations. So I think we need to appreciate where we have come from, and we also need to continue encouraging a lot of these local organizations. I know we have founders and directors who are extremely passionate about their causes, but being passionate as an individual is a different thing from now ensuring that there's a well-structured organization that will run whether the founder is there or not. So I think that is something that we also have to look at. Again, I think definitely there's some power imbalances that we've spoken about. Still, decision-making authority is not yet being is a bit centralized with some of these organizations, and we need to ensure that if we're to engage meaningfully with the so that it's not just a checkbox tick that you're ticking and ensuring that yes, we've engaged some local actors just to ascertain that we've met our deliverables, that we're actually ensuring that they have decision-making authority. So that is number one. So number two, to ensure capacity, the capacity gaps that they have. So we've said this over and over again. So we're hoping that we need to find some way of quantifying this, because it's become like a story that we continuously talk through. Again, where we are, I think we are getting a bit more trust and recognition. That one we have to accept from where we are from. We're getting a bit more of trust and recognition from organizations that will be doing. And you could see, even in the space, a lot of work that maybe potentially was being done by some international NGOs have not necessarily ended, but there's been a lot of partnership with the local organizations to be able to do this. So I think if we're able to tackle some of those particular instances, Dr. Kiragu, I think we're able to see a bit of shift, a bit of movement, and maybe also to ensure that lessons learned are captured on a regular basis. So I think that will be my take. Thanks.
Thank you, Kennedy, for that elaborate explanation. Angelo, moving over to you, what do you think we can do? I mean, there's an agreement that, there is movement. It's not moving as fast enough. How do we accelerate this? How do we get involved into this conversation and make sure that we are moving in the right direction at the right pace?
Right, a great question, and I really appreciated Lynn's taking us back to the Sankofa, which I actually didn't even know, but that stuck with me. And part of the reason is, and somebody else said, letting the lion tell the story of the antelope. Who is telling our story? And how can I think we will not be able to move to the direction we want to get true localization if we do not build our own evidence base. If we're using somebody else's evidence to take us forward, we are letting somebody define that story. And that person is going to define the direction we go because they own the story. And this goes back to all the way back to colonization and the stories that were being told of what happened and how it happened. So I think we should definitely invest in building an evidence base that tells the stories from the local communities in the voices of the local communities, by local communities themselves. I think if we continue to let somebody else tell that story, the evidence is going to be different. And therefore the results are going to be different, and they're going to be skewed to the motives of the person telling that story. So I think building an evidence-based, building our own evidence-based practices is going to be critical. I mean, again, looking back to look at the HIV/AIDS movement, the courage and resilience of the grandmothers who are left with, you know, grandchildren to take care of. Those are resources that are in the communities. Look at the movement of women living with HIV and what they've done to leave, to say, I am going to stay. I have a job to do here. I lost my husband. I've lost everything around me, but I leave. I'm going to choose to stay here. And the sense of community that they have built around them and the change that has come from that movement of women living with HIV, it is unbelievable. These are resources in local communities. These are resources from women who had absolutely nothing, who could have just given up and disappeared, but they chose to stay. So I think we need to lean in on that. We need to build that evidence base. We need to be able to look at all those resources. The other thing is around building robust governance and organizational structures. This has been, and again, many of these organizations have them, but how can we enhance those things? How can we, you know, build transparent leadership in those communities? We know that, again, people have talked about funding and how, you know, limited funding. That is true. How can we attract funding when we don't have the structures necessary to you know, to be accountable? If you're not able to say these are the standards within the organization that are going to ensure that we can say the funding that we got from, you know, MTN or from, you know, Airtel or from wherever, even from locally raised resources, if you're not able to show you have systems in place to account for them, how can we move forward? Then the other thing is about, you know, and again, this could be who is defining what's ethical and what's not. I think we have to name, there's a big elephant in the room that we also have to name. We do have founder syndrome in many of our organizations, where the person who is the vision bearer, you know, we and again, we found these organizations, we do a lot of amazing work, and we get stuck with the founder. And the vision gets stuck with the founder. Even sometimes when the founder, you know, needs to step aside to bring in new leadership, we're not mentoring enough people to be able to take that vision forward. And as the times change, priorities might change. We need to change tactics. We need to change the tools that we use. But if we are using our visionary founder from 40 years ago to take us into, you know, what the future needs, we're going to end up with what Lynn was describing, getting solutions and saying, oh, we need to be planting now, when we know the seasons have changed, or we know that the elephants are coming, and because we are so stuck in the past, we're not, you know, creating opportunities for the next generation of leadership, because, you know, we know the vision bearer is this person who founded this organization. So I think those are some of the nuggets that I think we can use to help us prepare forward. In the interest of time, I will yield the opportunity to other speakers, but those are my initial thoughts about that. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Angelo. Wonderful comments there. Samuel, there was looking forward. How do we accelerate this conversation? How do we move faster? I know with what you had brought in, localization has been happening, but there's also the shift in power that we are talking about. You know, local communities have the capacity. I think I think it's Angelo who said we have the capacity, but then the power and the resources are not shifting and we have the mandate. Local organizations have the mandate, they have the capacity, they have the connections to the community, but then the power, the resources are not with local organizations or with local entities. I mean, because it's broader than organizations. Samuel.
Thank you very much. And maybe allow me to share my screen, just 2 slides that have come to my mind as you were discussing, help me to drive the point. I'll put it on slide mode. Confirm you can view. Principle of equality. Kiragu?
Yes, you can see it.
Okay, thank you. So I'll use this slide and maybe just one more to tell the story. So how do we make progress? Well, like I said earlier on, I'm a firm believer that localization is really innate in us. I mean, you don't need to be told your name. That's what you've been doing. You've been leading from frontline. When we started the ICS, it's because we believe we needed to make a difference. So where is the difference? I think it is in appreciating that localization must be about partnerships. We are inviting a global partnership, and now we appreciate that. Like the Ubuntu saying in Africa says, I am because you are. You cannot be successful in Australia and feel safe and fine if other continents are not doing well. So partnership is very important. But at the heart of partnership is the quality of that partnership. And we did a study as a Consortium for Imagining Humanitarian Action and AICS as a secretariat in 2022 into 2023, where we asked leaders of local organizations in 5 countries in Africa, Kenya, South Sudan, Ethiopia, Mozambique, Somalia. And this particular slide was very interesting for me because, well, there are about 10 items, and you can see that very quickly on the next slide, of what you can use, has been used to define quality partnership, including equality, transparency, cultural sensitivity, and the other things. This one on equality, when people are asked, they feel that the partnerships that exist between funders and organizations at local level are equal. As you can see, there are almost as many who sort of agree and those who disagree. And when you ask, where are you disagreeing on? It is questions around how we communicate, how we plan and say this is priority. And it goes into elements such as how you determine what is the result that is most important. Myself and Dr. Kiragu, we conducted another study among survival-led organizations in East Africa with the Freedom Fund. And it was very interesting that even when organizations were given resources that are unrestricted, what they tended to do was to increase the number of beneficiaries in their projects, because that looked like the cool thing in the relationship with the donor. So we've really built this scenario where even as we get into this partnership and saying we want to do localization, we seem to be more about what matters most, that person who supports. And it's unfortunate that the giving that has been done by local people, including local communities, isn't as much documented and therefore not seen. Many of us are now appreciating, including our governments, the power in sending money, say, from those of us who've gone international. But even locally, a lot of us really give. So what I'm saying here is, I think there's a lot that can be done in trying to do this. And one way in which we've done this as Consortium for Imagining Humanitarian Action is building on what my brother Angelo said, that one, we need to be able to build community systems where the voices of the people at the community level. So we have something what we call community organizing and training. It's not very new, but we have agreed that we want to enhance this. The other pillar that is very important is being able to build evidence from communities, show what works and what doesn't work. And the last one, which I think is really important, is opening up the spaces for advocacy, where decisions are being made. We've been doing the grand bargain review meetings. I wonder how many local organizations ever get the space to go there and be part of being able to make a decision on that. So I think these are really the missing spaces. So let us build capacity on how this can be done. And I just want to applaud the HIV community, those who've done work around HIV and AIDS programming. We evaluated a program in Kenya. Again, Dr. Kirog was involved in this, and we were very amazed that a global fund for HIV has been consistent with the organization for 15 years. And now you can see what you will have called briefcase organizations 15 years ago have really moved beyond one-man leadership to a whole community. And that is what we mean. We must believe in these organizations and not expect them to do a miracle at one time, but walk with them that journey to be able to see them get to a point where they can be able to take leadership completely. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. That is a good segue to get into. Lynn, I had seen your hand up before I get to the next segment. I don't want to lose that thought that you had.
Yes, I had put my hand up because I wanted to agree very much with what was it Kennedy? Yes, what Kennedy was saying, because it's about the structures. In fact, I wanted to say that it's not localization, it's happening now as we speak. We must understand it in its simplest terms. If you come to my house, because I live near a river, if you come to my house and I leave you here and I go away, you'll be calling me. You will be telling me what happens. What do you do when this river overflows? Where do I put this? Where do I get this? And you wouldn't know, and you wouldn't read a book. You would depend on my knowledge of having been lived here, and that is not knowledge that you get anywhere. It is the knowledge of having lived here, and that is the wisdom without which you probably would have to go and look for somewhere else to live, because you don't know where to turn off the tap, or you don't know what to do so that the water does not come to the house. So I wanted to say that I think one of the things that I wanted to emphasize, even as we have this conversation, is that we need to even be very clear about our roles and about what we are talking about, the structures that we are talking about, and the gap between even ourselves. I know that this is very impressive. I see a lot of local people, but I think there's local, and I think that is where our energy needs to focus. When I was getting ready to come to this meeting, I went back. I did literature in school, so I was a beneficiary of a lot of stories, and I was able to ask a lot of questions. And when I saw, folks who had a lot of land, like my grandfather who was a leader, and I said, how did you manage to till this land? And they said, but we used to do it as a community. And I said, and I wanted to ask a stupid question. I mean, like, I could see, I said, did grandfather give you the money that he got from the coffee? He said, no, we didn't need any money. We came and we did this land and we moved to the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one. And we planted that way and we harvested a lot of food, which everybody put in their, in their granary. And they were also able to bring in people who for some reason did not either plant or had funds or whatever. And it was also an ecosystem, sort of arrangement that there were other people who would be working in the land. So because nobody funded that project and it worked, do we count the dollar much, so much, and we forget that the in-kind, the power that rests in these locals or these communities? And at some point, I feel like we just, not us, but there's just so much confusion that was, brought in, And these people's ways were scattered. I allow myself to say this with a bit of authority because I worked in refugee camps for many years. I worked with refugees for many years. And at some point, I know that I went to headquarters and I just thought, you know, I would be controversial. And I said, is it cheaper to house people in human warehouses? Or is it better to tell them that we are not able to supply what they need? And in fact, I then saw different models of encampment or lack of encampment. And I felt that the model that worked is where people did not sit expecting something to happen. For instance, in Uganda, refugees were not encamped. They, in Europe, where I worked, where I started my work, there were holding areas, but they were not refugee camps. People were able to do what they were doing and they were not waiting for anybody to do anything. So I feel that also we have to be very careful how we intervene so that we don't come and take over and, you know, and people sit down and then they have to listen to us. I think we have to marry how people's way of life can continue as we come to add something important with them. In India, in a whole region where there are very, very strong monsoon winds and that have over the years affected the villages and they do not plant. They've started a new technology, and I use technology very loosely because it's more appropriate technology. And this is on record. I mean, you can find it. And they started with the local wisdom. They figured out how to create water, to create wetlands. And they started, and it's the community that has done that completely. There has not been any foreign intervention. There has been one Indian that I think went to Indonesia or someplace and saw that happening. And in fact, I can share that with you somewhere because it's something that is very interesting, that can even work in many semi-arid and arid areas of Africa. And you can see the power that those local people have been able to do in this century. I'm not even talking about the other century. It's not because they abandoned aid and they stopped thinking in terms of money. They just went back like the bird and thought, but we also used to work as a community. And they went in one place, they took one space, they started, and they saw water. And then they went to the next one and the next one. And from there, they also summoned the wisdom of the past, where there once were rivers and are now, because of climate change and very many other reasons, they now became seasonal rivers. They also have a technology. There's no machinery. They also have a technology of regaining those seasonal rivers to permanent rivers. And it's very simple. And they just tell you. And I was thinking, when this guy was doing a presentation, I thought he was lying. Until I called him and I said, you know, I'm working in Kajiado and it's semi-arid. Would you be happy to come and do that? So I want to finish by saying that this helped me answer some of the two questions. One is, you know, what can we do for localization? And, you know, I think it was, and I was just saying, we just need to embrace this wisdom of going back and trying to see how did people survive. People survived and survived very well before we came. In fact, there can be stock taken about what has been destroyed, of what was working well, and what our coming and the development and the humanitarian action has done. So this used to work, and I agree with I think it was Angelo who was talking about structures. you know, and these areas used to work. They had very, very clearly spelled out codes of regulating morality, behavior, accountability, work ethic, the mechanisms of how they did that. They had complete with justice systems and so on and so forth. And now, because you're speaking about funding, I am a very strong believer in looking at funding in different ways, in diverse ways, not looking at it from only money, and looking at it from the human capital as well. Because you're in HIV, AIDS, you said, an area that I have also interacted with, that I can relate with SGBV at some point. And I think at some point we hit a snag. I think Sam knows. I met Sam in Liberia, but and I was working in Sierra Leone, where there was a lot of trouble with female genital mutilation, and we tried so many things to humbly come to the realization that sometimes it is not the money, it is not the machinery, it is not the education, it is not the mobilization. It is personal decision that comes from a man like Dr. Kerago and says, today I'm going to surprise my wife with roses, and from now on, I will not say that the tea is not cold or whatever. This is a personal decision. And in many ways, people used to regulate themselves. Can we go back and see how they used to work? Can we try and go back and see how we can rebuild their own traditional structures that used to work, and try and see how we can improve them? Because this is what I have seen also happen in India a lot, and it seems to work. So in fact, in terms of active actions, I was saying, when you're saying how can local organizations demonstrate preparedness and competence in humanitarian and development, they have always been competent. They have always been prepared, always been prepared. Yeah. So I don't want to go beyond that, but I was thinking, when we get to the actions, then I think we have a few things that we can suggest. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn, and you brought in some really important issues there around those structures. Collective action has always been at the heart of many of our communities, and but there's a question of, in this conversation, and I'll ask our panelists to maybe just take in 1 minute, just tell us what's a place of, do we have space for global South governments? Samuel, I know you are passionate about this. Is there a place where we bring in governments into this conversation to make it happen? And I want us to just get to the questions. I'm seeing there are lots of questions coming in, so that we end right on time. Samuel, where is the space for local governments in this conversation? And then Kennedy and Millicent, you'll take on what's the role of our international allies? Or are we dropping them out of this conversation? Or is it, are we moving together? Samuel.
Yeah, thank you very much. A very good point, and things. One is, I think our governments really must learn to believe in the local knowledge and local capacity. I get very embarrassed when I'm in meetings. There was this particular meeting where we were planning, and all the government looked out for was international organizations and the Kenyan government, for that matter. And I felt like this is really embarrassing. So we must get to a point where we totally believe in this, and we are able to map out and even allocate government resources towards this. Let us appreciate that we are able to give, and we are giving. And I'll give a quick example. We run a social enterprise, which is IX Consulting. And sometimes we've tried to contribute money for our education fund from the income generated from our consulting services. But what our accounting team always really, a difficult barrier for us is to ask, how are you going to pay the tax? Because our government does not acknowledge that we are actually contributing to the social protection program that they are trying to do. So I think let governments appreciate that we can do this. Let us also allocate money and one final example. In Kenya, when we crafted the Children's Act 2022, we did provide for a child welfare fund by the government to be given to local communities so that they are able to run programs on children by themselves. I think that's where we need to go. So that, if you look at about 100 billion or so Kenyan shillings that all the big organizations give towards children in Kenya, the government can do that really at no sweat. And that's where we need to go so that our governments acknowledge what we are able to make a difference in. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. Very good point there. Kennedy, are we leaving our international colleagues out of this conversation, or is there a place where we can work together towards this?
Okay, thank you, Michael. One, I think it will not be possible. It's not possible for us to leave our international allies, so they are very critical in advancing our localization efforts. So we need to leverage currently their resources that they currently have, their influence and expertise to be able to support our local actors. So we could be able to, we need to foster equitable collaboration and partnerships with these organizations. Now, what I want to speak, even before the local, our local allies come into play, we also have to get our houses in order. We really have to hold our governments a bit more accountable. We are quite embarrassing ourselves. So we were in, I will give an example. Last week I was in 2 government facilities, Kayole, Soweto, I don't know if I'm allowed to name them, 2 government facilities in Nairobi. Now, none of them has condoms, none of them has HIV self-test kits. And the reason is that these were fully donor-funded commodities. Now, Kenya shifted from being Kenya shifted to a middle-income economy, I think, during the former president Mwai Kibaki. So a lot of things changed and shifted in terms of what the donors support such kind of a country, or such kind of an economic status of that country. And those are some of the things that they started pulling back. I think there was a time we had a lot of news media mentioning that even ARV, I think, were to be affected. Now, and I'm thinking, up to now, we have yet to put our houses in order. If global funders stopped funding ARVs, we will be in deep problems right now. Yet we have 48 governments in Kenya, 47 county and the national government. We can't buy even test kits. So I think even before we go there, we have to start looking for our own local solutions. Why can't you have governments purchasing their own commodities? They aren't, they should be factored into the health budgets. How can we get policy change? How can we have our local organizations be part of implementing of these budgets into these local counties, into these assemblies, to ensure that these are some of the things. We are currently implementing social health authority through the SHIF. There is no place for adolescent health in that implementation. So it means if young people are, I hope everyone understands the targets that we had for HIV, 95, 95, 95. I hope it was all over the media when the AIDS pandemic was here. Now, most of the counties have actually achieved that. They are 94, 95, or 96. All of them have achieved. Now, but when you look at the data for adolescent health, they are still at 72. So the drivers of new HIV infections are coming for young people between 15 and 24 years of age. When these local counties are making budgets, nobody thinks about that. Nobody's there to push them to be able to do this. So I think, one, we need to put our houses in order. We need to at least show that we could do something with the little that we're getting. And I know our local organizations, we are saying we are non-partisan, so we don't get ourselves involved in politics. But this is where the funds are. This is where the budget is made. This is where they decide, where does the budget for health go? Where does the budget for... We need to have a bit more of those organizations come back and ensure that all, before even we go and ensure these are our partnerships with this. And I think that's the reason why you see we get this, we don't have capacity, we're getting such kind of feedback. And it's because when they look at how we are running our own affairs, it's very heartbreaking. So and I'm hoping that maybe in our generation or the next generation, we'll be able to see some meaningful change internally. But I feel our international allies are key, and they are almost, I think they have moved quite a distance to be able to say they're actually trying to see, even though some it's just to tick the box that we've worked with local communities. But I think where we are going to, as we also want to ensure that we maintain that relationship and we get equitable partnership, we're also putting our houses in order. Yeah. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Kennedy, for those really insightful comments. Millicent, you mentioned advocacy. How do we create a strong social movement around this topic of localization? In just a minute. Yeah, you are muted.
Sorry, thank you, Dr. Kiragu. For me, advocacy comes before everything else, and advocacy is creating awareness. How do we create awareness? Yeah, we have the grassroots leaders. Are they empowered? The local chief in the communities, do they understand what localization is? Why can't we leverage on local organization creating awareness and starting with grassroots leaders who know the local in and out? They're able to influence the people around to have the same voice and push for advocacy. We've talked about success stories. We do a lot of work, you know. We provide sanitary towels in primary schools. We provide education by providing good education by providing books, pencils, you know. We provide talks for free on best practices. Why can't we have success stories that showcase what we've been able to achieve locally? Because that is what goes out there to create comfort in people who want to invest in us. And then as well as leverage on technology. Use digital platforms to push for local voices, amplify that local voice digitally. Use apps. We have so many mobile apps, like we have Mchanga, where we can use to fundraise. Do we use that? Do communities know and local organizations know such tools and that we can use to amplify voices? Okay. Do we get feedback from our communities? Have a great feedback mechanism. Do we have a strong, robust governance structure? And how do we know that? Go back to the organizations that we support and ensure that they have policies that clearly define the functions. They define the finance, the program management, and the entire governance that will help us to hold larger fundings and responsibility comfortably, you know. Use evidence approach. Evidence approach, we've talked about that, but we are not taking it even to the local, to the county and the national government, that the people who need to understand what are some of these successful initiatives at the local level. And from these initiatives, make sure they align with the national priority. Look at the development plan. Is it matching? And use that platform to make noise, create awareness, create partners that can amplify the voice and speak in the same tone, you know? And lastly, I would say, just to add to what Ken had mentioned earlier, it's like going for an interview, you know? When you go for an interview, you pick, the employer picks the best interviewee, all right? So that's the same thing for the international donors and organizations, for them to be attracted to us. What are our evidence? Do we have work that we can showcase. This can be through abstracts, success stories, use the media, use the media and also locally sensitize people from the local by using the local media stations, empower communities in decision making so that if they're called upon to showcase what they have to offer to us in forums, they're able to speak to it. They're able to articulate so well, creating confidence among stakeholders, and then just ensuring that we have structures. Governance doesn't just stop at policies that govern the different functions, but how are we, how are we reporting? How are our finances? In such a way that if we are able to showcase our evidence to a donor, are we able to showcase some of the structures and the infrastructure that we have that can help us, push communities' initiatives the right way and in the right direction? Are we able to support project management and implementation from end to end? Do we know the right strategies? Do we have that? Are we able to showcase that to the donors, the government, and all the stakeholders? Tapping into the data analysis is very important. Having evidence of what we've worked on. Are we keeping our data? It can be as simple as using Tableau, using our Google suites and all that. So all in all, it's just about putting our house in order, create evidence, quality by ensuring all the structures that we have are sound and they conform to the best practices in the markets. Sorry, now a bit too adding.
Thank you, Millicent. Sorry to cut you off. I wanted some of our panelists to respond to some of the questions that are coming out here. Eric Omondi asks, how have global events such as the pandemic and socio-political changes influenced localization strategies? Angelo, you want to share an opinion how global events such as the pandemic and socio-political changes, how have they influenced localization?
Yeah,
yeah.
Yes, sure. I mean, these have had a really big impact. I've heard people say what's local is global, especially nowadays. I mean, what happens in Kajiado, even as we speak right now, will be known in New York, minutes before some people in Kajiado even know it. We saw how the, COVID-19 pandemic brought the world to its knees. It required reprioritization of global resources, but also local resources. It required, our governments to rethink where they needed to invest. So, funds that were earmarked for something to build community strengthening or to build a primary school or whatever it is, like funds had to be reprioritized. So global events like that did impact and will continue to impact localization priorities. And I think and this also like goes to part of the messaging that has been said before. We rely a lot on global funding to finance our localization or activities and programs on the local market. I think we need to do more to strengthen domestic resource mobilization. And such global events obviously have an impact on that. We need to work with governments, our governments, and other stakeholders to, for example, enhance tax administration. A lot of our domestic resources come from taxes. Can we improve efficiency and transparency in tax collection? Can we talk about illicit financial flows, and can we support governments and work with them to implement policies that curb tax evasion, for example? Let's talk about corruption, because those are the things that deplete the local resources that could go to some of our programming. Can we talk about innovative finance mechanisms? I mean, some of our countries, I think, Zimbabwe is one of them that have sin taxes, taxes on alcohol, taxes on cigarettes, and so on and so forth. Those are potential revenue generating opportunities. And then finally, and again, I come from Uganda, and one of the biggest earners of foreign income is funds from people like me in the diaspora. can we tap into that to ensure that we can raise more revenue that can support our domestic programming? Because, I mean, at the end of the day, we know who, again, Lynn, I'll come to you. You said you did literature. Remember that the saying, who pays the piper calls the tunes. We will continue to dance to those tunes of, whoever is funding, unless we change our domestic resource needs. So that's what I would leave us with. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. And I'll come to Lynn. Lynn, you'll sum this up for us with some concrete actions which we can, 2-3 actions that we can take home. But before that, there was another question from Desalen, which I would like Sam to respond to. Are international NGOs ready to support localization, the localization process? Sam?
Thank you very much. A very good question. Well, really, to be fair, that some of us, we were doing our localization without this vocabulary being appreciated and being thrown into the table by some of these international organizations. In our case, I must really give credit to, for example, Save the Children Office for Eastern Southern Africa. And I think we are seeing some progress, but really, there are also people who are finding it a very difficult thing. I'll give a quick example. When the US government said, through USAID, they'll have 25% of the grants moved to local organizations, we saw these international organizations register as national organizations. And honestly, there's no honesty. There's no truthfulness in that, no sincerity in trying to do that. So I guess it's a difficult thing. There are those who are really pro, but there are those who are really struggling to appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you. We know we are stretching this 3 minutes over the time we had promised. I know Angelo has to drop off. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and your time for this conversation. I'll go to Lynn. I'll ask her just in 2 minutes to just give us some concrete actions which we can, as many actors here in the Global South, some of the things we can implement to move this forward. You're muted.
I think that we must find ways to intentionally ensure that the movement is, we facilitate and inspire the local communities themselves to get back where they were, because sometimes they've said to many of us that they feel traumatized, that they were told what you're doing is not important, let's go to something else, and then that's something that hasn't worked. So if we can look at what is happening and encourage them to continue to do that and add whatever else need to be done, then that would be very useful. I think engagement with the Global South, remember I started with saying communal work. They used to work together, they used to synergize, and I think that needs to be encouraged. I have seen communities who are nomadic in, say, Turkana, that have adopted things. I think we can move those ones. They can come to the Maasais somewhere else because they have more or less the same situation, and learn from each other. I think that we can facilitate, the exchange, the synergy, open trading, cultural exchange, and bringing governments there, and actually thinking carefully how we bring in government. I think Sam and I have had quite a few meetings where we are wondering how we organize government, especially the government, as it's working now with devolution. So we need to really redefine what is working and what works, and build those structures. And but I think that we need to really come up with examples of what is working and move them forward, so that even when we are going to to speak. We're speaking with the specific concrete examples of what has worked. And I think that is really something that we can do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lynn, for summing that up. I think we really appreciate you and all the other panelists, Kennedy, Millicent, Samuel, Angelo, Lynn. We really, really appreciate you having shared your time, your thoughts and your perspectives. It was very valuable. This conversation continues. As we said, I think, Millicent, you are at the heart of calling for strong advocacy. We are building and communities of practice. We want to build a movement of organizations that are committed to making localization happen. And so we are going to be calling on, each and every one of us to join that conversation. My colleague Stanley is the coordinator for CRHA. I think he can share his email right here. We have received many requests for organizations that want to be affiliated to the Consortium for Reimagining Humanitarian Action. Affiliates are still a loose association with the consortium, but we want to see how we can build this movement together. Stanley, if you can just put your email there, they can reach out to you and connect with you. And definitely we are keeping everyone. You signed up to a sheet, so we'll shoot you emails when we have the next conversation. But from the entire Consortium for Reimagining Humanitarian Action, led by AICS, I want to thank each and every one of you for participating in this. And we wish you a lovely evening. And those who have a whole day ahead of them, have a lovely day. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, Stanley's email is right there. Stanley at Institute Chat. So pick that up.